Hello everyone, this is update for April 21, 2024, day 788 of the war, end of the date update. Also catch up for April 20th and 19th. So I'm going to start first with the strategic and general update, and then I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield. First is a situation out far away from Ukraine. But it's all related. The war for Africa continues, and the West is losing it. U.S. Army is leaving Niger. This is a country in called Sahara Africa. So it was squeezed, and the U.S. troops are leaving. There's military base there with roughly 1,000 troops, and the U.S. troops looks like they're going to be replaced with the Russian troops, and they will going to use former U.S. military base there. This doesn't stop there. Things are sort of getting, as they say, from bad to worse. So it looks like the Chad is the country that's neighboring Niger has sent letter to the U.S. asking them to leave as well, to remove U.S. troops from Chad. That's just another blow. It's still in the works, I guess, but it's coming soon, as they say. Now I'm gonna switch to the situation with the voting for funding for Ukraine. It's not just Ukraine; it's for Israel and Taiwan. So, which, as you can imagine, this voting cements anti-West coalition. I don't know how the best way to call that coalition, but it's Russia, Iran, and China. Obviously, North Korea is there, but really, North Korea is extension of China. So, just kind of like sort of like Russia in Belarus, which is where Belarus is extension effectively of Russia. So again, this cements and this alliance, and clearly, makes China, will cause some reaction from China in very clear way. There's news share going that China is actively reforming its army, which, as you can imagine, not in preparation for peaceful time. That's obviously preparation for eventual military confrontation, and obviously this whole situation going into escalation. But in many ways, it's inevitable. The bigger problem is actually in U.S. Politics, where there is a problem. Looks like there is going to be a problem in the lower chamber of the U.S. Parliament, where effectively, this is not just lower chamber, but effectively, Republican Party is sort of splitting into two pieces, roughly equal. And this is all related based on internal politics. Ukraine there is just kind of like a tool or leverage in this whole negotiation. And the problem is that based on the vote was such that majority actually of Republicans did not support aid to Ukraine. So it passed based on the support from Democratic Party. And that creates problem for the speaker, who is Republican, and effectively there are rumors that there is enough Republicans in his own party who are ready to basically ask him to step down, and that's really going to create political disarray, I guess, in the lower chamber of U.S. Parliament. Because if they put that up for the vote, there is most likely there will be enough votes from actually Democratic Party, so he will have to step down, and then there's no way, or not there's no way, but it's just going to be probably another 4 or 5 months of election campaign in terms of electing new speaker of the U.S. Lower chamber of U.S. Parliament, which will make it faculty dysfunctional during all of that time. So again, U.S. is looking towards full-blown political crisis, especially going into elections. It's gonna make things really pretty dangerous for everyone in the West, because obviously the backbone of the West strength is the U.S. Now I'm gonna switch to the situation. Oh, and then before I switch to Ukraine, what's going on in Russia? Russia military-industrial complex is actively ramping up production. Russian factory in Kaluga region resume mass production of gas turbine engines for tanks, specifically for T-80. For those who don't know much, there are sort of two branches effectively. One is using diesel engine, which is T-72, which is the main Russian tank, and then T-90, which is basically further development of T-72, essentially demodernization of T-72. There is no significant real difference there. And then there is family of T-80s, and those are using gas turbine engines, sort of similar to what's being done with the U.S. Abrams tanks. They're not the best choice. They're extremely powerful, but they have a lot of negatives. This fact is sort of indicative that Russian military-industrial complex does not have enough capacity to increase actually T-72s and T-90s production of those, and the production of diesel engines is limited, and so they go for whatever is available, basically resurrecting production of these gas turbine engines that was essentially dead for a while. But the whole point is there is increasing ramping up military production in Russia. That's the biggest point out of all of this. And Russian political top is not stopping at anything at any opportunities to increase production, even by doing not the most ideal sort of solution, but still it brings tanks on the front line. Sorry. Now, finally, I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. And things are getting worse, noticeably worse, where there are more and more reports where some Ukrainian units, not the entire units, but let's say company or squad, or platoon, they would retreat, open up the gap for Russian attack, and then there's deep penetration of Russian troops. So these things are happening more and more often in such a way. There was the Russian troops advanced to village Ocheretyne. I will discuss it once we get there. The big picture of the situation is that Ukrainian army is slowly starting to fall apart, and it's becoming demoralized. It's in many ways behaving how the Soviet army was behaving in the summer of 1942, where there is some units will retreat, leaving the huge gaps through which the German troops will advance, and this is what's really happening right now with Ukrainian army. This is going back to the motivation that I mentioned many times before, and you really cannot replace that motivation with weapons, because the weapon is people, and they are the most dangerous weapon out of all. And so, again, this goal goes all the way back to the situation in Ukraine, where essentially many people don't see that country Ukrainian political top is acting in their best interest. And I'm not talking about the continuing war with Russia. I'm talking about the corruption and effectively theft of public funds, misuse, unfairness, where some people are protected from mobilization versus the majority are not. So essentially, it's creating two-tiered system, and obviously it doesn't help with motivation. It actually destroys any kind of motivation, and so that's why you see that Ukrainian people are voting with their feet, running away towards west, or simply surrendering or retreating when Russian troops put enough pressure. So again, this is literally a mirror image of what happened to the Soviet Union and why it was losing war against Germany at the beginning of the war in 1941 and 42. And this problem, as I stated before, is not going to get resolved with this new round of funding, new weapons, and so on, because if there's no motivation, these weapons are going to be simply abandoned, and which is actually what we're seeing more and more, where all of these Marders, the Bradleys, and so on, they simply being abandoned at the slightest threat. And Russian troops actually capturing some of them are in fully operational state. So there are many multiple signs of sort of internal decay and degradation within the Ukrainian army, unfortunately. But this is not the fault of the people. It's really the system that's being built that's not representing their interest, and people obviously will not fight for such system. So now I'm going to do a walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border remains more or less the same. No essential changes there. No imminent threat of any Russian invasion from the northeast. Let's move to the situation on the North Lugansk front line. As I mentioned before, this is really kind of dead end for both Ukraine and Russia. So the front line is more or less stable. There is some Russian pressure here around this village Terny, but the main point of this pressure is to keep Ukrainian troops in this area, so Ukrainian command cannot pull reserves from this area, and more specifically, so that this 12th Brigade Azov is staying in this area. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. The northern sector more or less stable. There is some Russian pressure which remains, doesn't go away. As I mentioned before, the immediate objective is this town Siversk, and generally they just want to eliminate this sort of peninsular or salient, whatever you call it, around this town Siversk. But there's not simply enough resources on the Russian side to accomplish this goal immediately. So they just slowly putting pressure there without much success yet. Now let's move to the situation west of Bakhmut. Russian troops continuing their pressure, continuing their attacks. So as I mentioned, they already built sort of southern pincer, or at least, not completely, but basically created a base for it. Now they focused on creating the northern one. So they starting attacks towards this village Kalinivka. So essentially the goal is to get to this freshwater channel north of the town Chasiv Yar, and eventually cross the channel south and north, and effectively squeezing Ukrainian troops from Chasiv Yar. So the goal here is pretty straightforward. There's nothing unusual. pretty standard strategy that's being applied by the Russian military command. The way things go, this is gonna happen. It's just the only question of time. It's hard to say. I'd say it's probably gonna take another month and a half, maybe 2 months before this is really actually gonna happen. But given that I mentioned before that there is very clear degradation in Ukrainian military, this may happen sooner, but we'll see. Now let's move towards central Donbass front line, where things really kind of unraveling in some ways, I would say. So this is first this situation when I mentioned where Russian troops managed to break through towards this village Ocheretyne. And what happened, they captured significant portion of it. And then there was counterattack where the Ukrainian command had to use 47th Brigade, which is at this point pretty exhausted, and as the last sort of ditch and sort of plugged the hole, and they did some counterattack, so they pushed for a short period of time Russian troops out of this village. But then Russian troops resumed their pressure. So the situation right now is roughly that Ukrainian troops are controlling northwestern corner of it, and Russian troops are controlling southeastern, and then the fighting somewhere at diagonal, somewhere going between these two corners. This really means this breakthrough really happened because some of the other units of the Ukrainian army withdrew retreated, basically opened the flanks under the Russian pressure without really much fight. So again, this goes back to what I discussed before. I'm not going to repeat it, but these situations will become more and more frequent as things go. And as you can see, this is the result of all of this. Where it's going to happen next, nobody knows. But now let's move a little bit south. Russian troops are actively in process of capturing this town Krasnohorivka. So they control southeastern again corner of the town. Ukrainian troops firmly controlling northwestern, and the fight is again sort of kind of like diagonal happening between those two corners. Then Russian troops pretty much squeezed Ukrainian troops out of this town of Mikhailivka. This being going on for a long time, I don't know, probably 2 months or more. But eventually this happened. There are some allegedly the Ukrainian troops still controlling the western outskirts of the town, but the fate is there. It's the writing is on the wall. It's very clear. If not, in today, then in a couple days, Ukrainian troops will lose control of the town. Now let's move to the next section of the front line, which is Zaporizhya. Things here are fairly quiet. This goes back to what I mentioned before, that Russian command does not have enough troops to do attacks, and I wouldn't even call this offensives, because they are really still closer to peasants' army kind of squeezes rather than true offensives. But as I stated before, they sort of learning, improving, but still sort of far way to go. So they don't have enough resources, and for that reason, this section of the front line is fairly quiet. Now let's finish with the last section of the front line along the Dnipro River. Things here are fairly quiet, exactly for the same reason as on the Zaporizhya, where because Russian command is concentrating all of their resources on the key section of the front line, which is correct strategy. That's how it's supposed to be done. and there is no question about it. And for that reason, the rest of the front line is relatively quiet. That's it for the day. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.